Steve Jobs once said something like this: "The reason Apple is Apple isn't that we're smarter, it's that we have taste, a sense of what's actually good." When I first heard that line 10 years ago, I thought it was a beautiful piece of fortune cookie wisdom. 10 years later, I'm a hardware product manager myself, and I just built an entire product from scratch using AI. Only then did I finally understand what he was saying. He was describing the single most expensive skill of this decade. Hey, I'm Lam. I'm a hardware PM. Over the past few years, I've shipped a handful of consumer electronics products: industrial design, mechanical, electronics, firmware, supply chain. I've been in the room for all of it. Today, I want to talk about three things. One, how people like me used to build hardware times before times AI. It was slow. It was painful. Two, what my workflow actually looks like today. I use a recent project as the example, a small English learning robot I built for kids. And three, this is the part I most want you to hear. When AI lets everyone times make things at the same speed, what suddenly becomes valuable instead? Let me spoil the answer. Communication, decision making, and taste. Let's rewind 3 or 4 years. Back then, shipping a hardware product looked roughly like this. Step 1. Research. Read dozens of industry reports. Build a competitor matrix by hand. SKUs, price bands, customer reviews. Order 5 to 10 of the competing products. Use them myself. Sometimes sit down face to face with real users. Then go visit the factories that actually make this category. Walk through the manufacturing process with them. That step alone takes 2 to 3 weeks. Step 2, write the PRD. A real hardware PRD is dozens of pages: target users, use cases, feature list, interaction flows, BOM direction, risk register. My first draft, on a good week, took 5 working days. Step 3, alignment. Then I'd walk that PRD through every team: industrial design, mechanical, electronics, software, supply chain. Every team had a different opinion. Every meeting produced a new version. A full month of arguments was normal. Step 4, prototype. Only after every team signed off on the technical plan will we actually start building. And one prototype is never enough. It usually takes 3 or 4 revisions before it's something I want to show anyone. By the time the first power-on unit was sitting in front of me, 3 months had already evaporated. And that's the time's happy path. Happy paths are mostly a hallucination. In reality, the script usually went more like this. We spent 2 months arguing about whether to build a feature. The boss would say, "Just ship it and see." We spent another 2 months building it. And then we discover users didn't actually want it. If I'm honest, in that era, a hardware PM spent maybe 80% of their time as a courier, carrying market data to the boss, carrying the boss's ideas to design, carrying design solutions to the factory, carrying the factory's constraints back to the boss. The time spent actually times judging what was the right product to build times probably less than 10%. Now, let me show you what a day looks like for me today. Research used to take 2 to 3 weeks. Today, it takes an afternoon. I'll point AI at the top 100 SKUs in a category. 3 years of 1-star reviews. The key patents. The actual complaints people are posting on Reddit and Xiaohongshu. And it comes back as a single structured table. My job is no longer to gather. My job is to ask the right questions. Writing the PRD used to take a week. Today, it takes one evening. And no, I don't let AI write the PRD for me. That's the dumbest possible use of it. What I do is talk for 30 minutes, out loud, telling the product's story. AI turns that monologue into a rough draft, and then I rewrite it line by line. AI here is like the world's most patient intern. It takes the mess in my head and turns it into something a team can actually read. Prototyping, this is where the biggest shift happens. In the old world, I waited a month for mechanical, for electronics, for firmware, before I could touch the first sample. In the new world, I use AI to write the code. I use AI to generate the 3D model of the shell, then 3D print it. I use an off-the-shelf dev board for the main PCB. I plug a speech model into the loop for the conversation. From idea to a robot that could actually talk to a child 11 days. Not 11 weeks. 11 days.
Hi, Meow Meow.
Excellent. You're getting the hang of it. Let's keep going. How about we talk about your favorite color? I'm glad you're enjoying our chat. Let's keep practicing English.
This is the robot I keep talking about. The core scenario is that simple. A child between 5 and 9 years old can practice spoken English with it without a parent in the room. Now you might say, aren't there already 100 English learning apps? Yes. But I wanted to solve 3 things apps cannot. 1. The screen shouldn't be the main thing. Parents don't want their kids glued to a screen all day. So first, it has to be a physical object. Something a kid can actually hold in their arms. The screen is just a helper. Most of the time, the kid doesn't even need to be looking at it. 2. Kids need to be responded to, not graded. Most apps open with "Your pronunciation scored a 78," and the child immediately quits. My robot laughs first, then praises, then gently corrects. 3. Parents need to feel safe, so the design is deliberately restrained. No camera, a few simple buttons, one speaker, and one small display used only for the robot's facial expressions. And honestly, what I just showed you is a rough prototype, nowhere near ready for mass production. And there's no exotic technology inside it either. The hard part isn't the hardware. The hard part is the reason of the interaction. When should it talk? When should it stay quiet? When should it pretend not to understand so the child gets to be the teacher? Those aren't engineering questions. Those are taste questions. And taste, at this stage, exactly what AI cannot do for you. At this point, you might think this is a video about how AI makes everything easier. It's not. The point I actually want to make is the opposite. AI has made building the thing cheap. That used to be the mode. It isn't anymore. A few years ago, just being able times to ship hardware was a competitive advantage. If you could line up the supply chain, get firmware working, get mechanical to close, you were already halfway to a product that's gone. Today, by myself, in a single afternoon, I can produce 3 completely different prototypes of an English learning robot. One warm and comforting, one gamified, one serious and academic. The question isn't, can we build it? The question is, which one should exist? That is where the jobs line from the opening comes back. When AI infinitely amplifies our ability to execute, the bottleneck shifts. It slides from execution to judgment. Judgment of what exactly? 3 things. First, judgment about which problems are worth solving. That's strategic taste. Second, judgment about which solution is elegant. That's aesthetic taste. Third, and the rarest, judgment about when to say no. That's the taste of subtraction. AI cannot do these three things because AI has no point of view. It will hand you 10 options, and all of them will look pretty reasonable. Picking one, that's still on us. So here's what I've come to believe. In the AI era, a product manager will not become more valuable just because they know how to use AI. Using AI is table stakes. It's like knowing Excel 10 years ago. What will actually be valuable is this. When AI hands you 10 options, the courage and the judgment to look at all of them and say, none of these are right. I want the 11th one. That instinct doesn't come from prompts. It comes from how many good things you've studied, how many bad things you've sat with, how many of your own products you've watched fail. It has another name. It's called taste. I'd love to hear from you. Whatever you do for a living, drop a comment and tell me two things. One, what's your job? Two, in your work, what's the one thing AI can't replace? Is it taste? Judgment? The way you deal with people? Something else entirely? I read every comment. Seriously. See you next time.